There was once a lion who lived not under the golden light of the savannah, but in the damp, cold silence of a forgotten cave. He was born to rule, yet he trembled like prey. The jungle called him king, but he called himself a shadow. His mane was heavy, his heart heavier still, a crown he could never lift. He feared everything, the rustle of grass, the whisper of wind, even the echo of his own roar. So he stopped roaring. He hid. The once majestic lion, whose ancestors had thundered across the plains, now slept through his days and dreamed through his nights, hoping the world would forget he existed. But he hadn't always been that way. Once he had been a bright-eyed cub, fearless and full of questions. His father was a true king, strong, noble, unshaken. The young lion followed him everywhere, mimicking his every move, believing that courage was something he would inherit, like a mane or a crown. Then came the day that broke his spirit. He and his father went hunting beneath a burning sky. The air smelled of dust and destiny. From the tall grass, shadows emerged, hyenas, dozens of them, their laughter sharp as knives. The old lion roared, defiant and fierce, as he leapt into the fray. Claws met teeth, strength met chaos. The cub froze. His body refused to move. Fear rooted him where he stood as he watched his father surrounded. The king fought with all the might of his bloodline, but there were too many. The sound of snapping jaws, of torn flesh, of his father's final roar, it shattered something inside him. The cub ran. He ran without looking back, without thought, without breath. He ran until the sound of his father's struggle faded into silence. When he reached the cave, he collapsed into his mother's fur, shaking, sobbing, unable to speak. The world outside became a nightmare, and he swore never to face it again. From that day, the light in his eyes dimmed. The jungle still called him king, but he no longer answered. He grew, but not into the lion he was meant to be. The brave cub had died with his father. What remained was a body ruled by fear, a soul caged inside itself. And so he stayed in the cave, year after year, hiding from the sun, from the sound of wings, from his own reflection on the water. He became a ghost in his own kingdom, the lion who forgot how to roar.
Seasons passed, and the jungle forgot its king. The animals whispered stories about him, stories that grow crueler with time. Some called him the coward king. Others said he had lost his roar to the wind. And perhaps, deep down, they were right. Inside his cave, the lion had built a small world out of shadows. He told himself he didn't need the light. But hunger has a way of breaking the walls we build around ourselves. One morning, his stomach gnawed so deeply that he could no longer ignore it. With trembling paws and a heart that beat like a trapped bird, he stepped out into the day. The sunlight burned his eyes. Every sound, every chirp, every rustle made him flinch. He moved carefully, the way a thief moves through the house he once owned. The scent of life was everywhere, wildflowers, dust, and distant rain, but to him it all smelled of danger. Then he heard it. Laughter. That old, cruel laughter that had haunted his dreams since he was a cub. He froze. Out of the brush came the same mocking voices that once ended his father's reign. A pack of hyenas. Their yellow eyes gleamed with malice as they circled him, their grins wide and sharp. "Well, what we found," one of them hissed. "The mighty king, all alone. Has he come to die?" The lion's breath quickened, his muscles locked. He wanted to run, to vanish back into the cave, but there was nowhere to hide. Another hyena sneered. "Where's your roar, coward king? Did you bury it with your father?" Their laughter stabbed like thorns. The lion's heart pounded louder and louder until he thought it would burst. He closed his eyes, waiting for the end, the snapping jaws, the final pain. But instead of teeth, he heard something else. A sound that shook the air. A roar. It was deep, ancient, powerful. The kind of sound that made the ground tremble and the trees bow. The hyenas froze. The lion opened his eyes. Standing between him and the pack was not another lion, but a man. Old, robed in orange, his beard white as moonlight. He looked fragile, yet there was an immovable stillness in his stance. The air around him seemed to glow. The monk looked at the hyenas, his eyes calm, his voice steady. "Leave this creature in peace," he said. "It is unwise to mock a lion or a man who knows how to roar." The hyenas, startled and confused, backed away into the undergrowth, their laughter fading into uneasy silence. The monk turned to the lion, who still trembled, wide-eyed, too stunned to speak. "Come," said the monk softly. "There is something you need to see." And with slow, uncertain steps, the lion followed the stranger deeper into the forest, toward the lesson that would change everything.
The monk led the lion through the forest, where the air was still and the light fell like silk through the trees. Each step felt heavy, yet strangely peaceful. The lion's heart still raced, but beside the monk, the world seemed quieter, as if even the wind bowed to this old man's calm. After a long silence, they reached a lake. Its surface was perfectly still, like a mirror that had never known a ripple. The lion peered into it and saw, for the first time, his reflection, not the blurred shape in the cave's puddles, but a clear image under the open sky. "Look closely," said the monk, his voice low and steady. The lion hesitated, but then leaned forward. He saw golden fur, a mane touched by light, eyes deep and alive. It startled him. He looked away. "I see a lion," he murmured. The monk smiled. "Then see him again." Slowly the lion turned back to the water. This time he didn't just see his body, he saw strength. Wounds healed and unhealed, yes, but strength nonetheless. The kind that endures storms, not escapes them. The monk spoke again. "Do you know why you could not roar?" The lion shook his head. "Because you forgot what your roar was for. It was never meant to frighten. It was meant to awaken, to remind the world and yourself of who you are." The lion's breath deepened. The forest seemed to breathe with him. He closed his eyes and listened, not to the monk, not to the world, but to the pulse that had been buried under years of fear. And then he heard it. It was faint at first, a sound rising from within, the echo of something ancient. When he opened his mouth, it came out, not as anger, not as pride, but as truth. A roar that shook the water and sent the birds into flight. The monk bowed his head. "There it is," he whispered, "the song of your spirit." The lion stood taller, the tremor in his limbs gone. For the first time since his father's death, he felt whole. Not brave because he was unafraid, but brave because he could face fear and stay.
The monk gazed at the lion for a long while. His eyes were kind, yet unflinching, like someone who had looked into many souls and seen what lies beneath fear. "My friend," he said, "strength is not something you find out there. It is something you remember in here." He pointed gently toward the lion's chest. "Listen carefully," the monk continued, "for I will give you 3 counsels that all kings and all beings must know." He raised one finger. "First, do not be deceived by appearances. The world often hides power beneath gentleness, and truth beneath silence. See beyond what your eyes tell you." A second finger. "Second, do not cling to what you cannot control. The wind will blow, the seasons will turn. You cannot hold the river still, but you can learn to swim in its current." A third finger. "And third, do not isolate yourself from the world. Even the mightiest tree needs the forest around it to survive. Strength grows only through connection, through trust, compassion, and shared purpose." The lion listened, each word sinking deep like rain into dry earth. Something shifted in him, a quiet realization that all his life he had mistaken solitude for safety. Now he understood. The cave had not been his shelter, it had been his cage. The monk placed a hand upon the lion's mane. He said, "You have feared your shadow, but your shadow was never your enemy. It was simply the part of you waiting to be seen." For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the forest breathed around them, wind through leaves, the hum of life returning. Then the lion bowed his head in gratitude. When he lifted it again, the sun was breaking through the canopy. Light fell upon him like a crown.
The lion walked beside the monk until the path opened into the heart of the jungle. The morning light poured through the trees like a blessing, and the air carried the scent of new beginnings. They stopped at the edge of a hill. From there, the lion could see his kingdom, the rivers winding like silver, the plains glowing under the sun, the herds moving freely. It was the same land he had once ruled, but to him it looked new. The monk spoke softly, his gaze on the horizon. "You were born to lead, not with fear, but with understanding. A true king does not dominate, he protects. He does not roar to prove his power, but to awaken courage in others." The lion closed his eyes, breathing in the warmth of the sun. For the first time, the weight he carried felt lighter. He turned to thank the monk, but the old man was already stepping back into the forest, his orange robe dissolving into the golden light. "Remember," the monk's voice echoed faintly, "what you seek is already within you. Walk wisely, my friend." The lion watched him fade, then looked once more at the land below. This time he did not hesitate. He descended the hill with a steady, confident stride, no longer a shadow among trees, but a light moving through them. When the other animals saw him, silence spread across the jungle. The whispers stopped. The mockery ended. Even the wind seemed to pause as the lion stepped into the clearing. He did not need to roar. His presence spoke louder than any sound. He approached the watering hole, the same one he had once feared, and looked into its surface. His reflection no longer trembled. The lion smiled, not with pride, but with peace. He had not destroyed fear. He had befriended it. He had not conquered the jungle. He had learned to walk in harmony with it. That day, the animals bowed not because he was the strongest, but because he was finally whole. And from that day on, the jungle was ruled not by the roar of might, but by the quiet power of wisdom. This is the story of a lion who feared his own shadow, until he learned that light and darkness are never enemies. They complete each other. If this story touched something within you, remember, courage is not about never being afraid. It's about walking forward even when your heart trembles. Subscribe to Monk Wisdom to journey with us, where stories awaken souls and silence teaches what words cannot.